We are learning to trust the ever-evolving rhythms of nature.
We are committed to embracing our shadow within community
and reclaiming our sovereignty.
We do this together.
That is the way.
Welcome to the Elemental Movement podcast. Before me, I have my brother and fellow founder of Elemental Movement, Elden.
Yo.
Could you state your full name for us, please?
I refer to myself and like to as Elden Vala.
Well, it's good to see you.
Thank you.
So,
what's your name? What's your name?
My name is Matt Matucci, and I'm coming from Bellingham, Washington.
Yeah, I am residing on what's most commonly known as the San Francisco Peninsula. I like to acknowledge the Ramaytush Ohlone and the Tam Yen peoples living somewhere in the intersection of the territories that are their ancestral homelands, where I'm guessing that there are bones in these lands that hold me. Feels integral for me to presence them.
Yeah, so first I want to state, like, the purpose of today is to get to know you and to talk about who is Elden Vala. And in that, I just also want to dive into a little bit of like your thought processes and how you approach things. So I think this is a perfect jumping off point to diving into what you just went into about that land acknowledgement. Tell me what compels you to do that, and could you talk a little bit about that for me?
Yeah. So I want to acknowledge for myself this is a spiritual practice for me to acknowledge the land. And if I were to define myself spiritually very loosely, I would refer to myself as an animist, meaning that I believe and feel that everything has spirit, an animating force, which I also just call life. And there's varying dimensions of life. And the land, the soil, the rock, that which gives life to plants, and then thereby many in fungus and many different microorganisms, inclusive of humans and other mammals and birds and reptiles and all of them. There's an essence to the land, and that essence has been flavored by many generations of beings, both human and otherwise. I am a human, and so it feels really important to me to acknowledge the lineage of humanity that has lived with this land and resides within this land in latter stages of life, aka decomposition and recomposition as soil and plant and oxygen and et cetera. So that's one layer to it. Like that's my spiritual practice, is to acknowledge that. There's also just like a practical reality that I live on a land that I get to live on as a byproduct of genocide. It didn't happen that long ago. It's like 200 years ago. Like there were hundreds of thousands of indigenous people living in the land, on the general landmass that I know is California. And post gold rush, so like we're talking 1860s and 70s, estimates are that number had been cut down to like 15,000. And I'm not down for that. I'm like not an advocate for genocide or land theft. And so that's what happened, right? Like there was gold, we came in, we took the gold, we took the land, we killed the people. When I say we, I'm referring specifically to like ancestors of mine who weren't necessarily those who actually did the killing, but like they had the benefit of the land. My family's been in this area since the 1860s. And so it feels really important for me to acknowledge what I'm connected to. And by acknowledging the people who lived here, I'm acknowledging a part of that connection. It's also something that the people who lived here, who are still around,
Some of
side
them.
note, some of them. So the Ramaytush Ohlone people specifically, I've done the most research on. The Tamien people are newer to me, and I actually got to sit in a ceremony in which a Ramaytush Ohlone man offered a prayer. I've lived in the territory that was their ancestral, or is their ancestral homeland, my entire life. With, I think there was 1 year when I lived down in like San Diego. I don't know whose ancestral homeland I was living in, but that's the only period in my time in my life when I wasn't living on the ancestral homeland of the Ramaytush Ohlone. I'm now 35. I was 34 the first time I ever knowingly sat in a room with someone from that lineage. To the best of my knowledge, there's only one family left from that lineage that still carries the lineage, and which is just amazing and terrifying to consider. This sounds like they were a thriving people pre Spaniards, and not so much, but they're coming back, and they're asking for land acknowledgement. It's something that they want, and as someone who lives on their ancestral homeland, it feels important to me to, like, it feels like the least that I could do is to acknowledge the land that is their ancestral homeland. I would love to be able to support them in larger ways, and maybe at some point in my lifetime I'll be able to, but right now that's what I can do, and so I do it.
That's good to hear. I always appreciate your perspective on these things.
Thank you.
So thank you. Brings up thoughts for myself too, inspiration for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I think we'll shift gears now and go into just, who are you? Where do you come from? That's a better start.
Where do I come from?
Yeah, could you give a little background on yourself?
Sure. So geographically, my ancestry comes from Wales, in terms of what I can I actually know story-wise. And then before that, apparently, we were Danish. So there's some Viking lineage back there somewhere, I believe, using that term Viking kind of lazily, but that's where my bones come from, at least the original blueprint for them that I know about. And I grew up in the Bay Area in Pacifica, California, coast side Bay Area. The land here is really developed my skin, bones, breath, and movement. I am a father to a 7.5-year-old young girl. I am a co-parent to her mother. I am partner to Isla, who's one of our founding four here at Elemental Movement. I am inspired by people, by humans who are willing to show up for themselves and others in their lives in increasingly authentic ways, and to examine the patterns, ways of doing and being that limit our authenticity. And I am passionate about supporting people who are on that path in a variety of different contexts, be it physically engaging strength and movement, finding breath and utilizing breath, using the mind to notice and recreate stories in ways that are life affirming versus life negating, and in couples that are in relationship and figuring out how to do this whole human relationship thing with more mutual dignity and respect for one another. And I really just love being out in nature.
Amazing. I guess knowing you for a while now, we've known each other for 5-ish years,
give or take.
Yeah. And I've witnessed you going through a transformation for sure over those years. And I'm sure you've had transformations before as well. Knowing your story, I've heard you had a variety of transformations. And I was wondering if you could share with us what got you to where you are today and the interests that you hold now,
Hmm.
what you just shared? Go as far
Yeah.
back or as recent as you'd like.
Yeah, I immediately knew where to go, and I just like kind of feeling into how I want to frame it. And when I say that, what I mean is just like wanting to take consideration of anyone who's listening to this outside of the two of us. So I'm going to talk about some things that can bring up some things. And so if you're at a place where you can listen to stories of like contemplating ending one's life and depression, etc., then like feel free to keep listening. And if you don't, then maybe take a pause. Okay, I'm going to start yesterday. I went to a breathwork session yesterday with a buddy named Mike Barrios, and he is someone who he's a practitioner of a technique called somatic release breathwork. And in the breathwork session, well, I've been getting to a place where I'm really connecting with my pelvic floor very intentionally. Have been for a while through breathing. And in this hour of breathing yesterday, I really connected with it. And in that connection, I realized that I have never felt safer than I did in my mom's womb. And I realized that not in an intellectual like way, but like a physical, like somatic, like, wow, I remembered the feeling of being in my mom's womb, and I remembered the feeling of being out of that womb, and like, fuck this noise, I want back in. And from birth, like I had that imprint. I don't know that everyone has that imprint. I don't know that they don't. I just know that I do. And coming out into this world, like really, it fucked with me. Didn't I didn't feel good about the world that I lived in. I didn't like the name I was born with, which is different than the name that I use now. I didn't like family. Like I loved my family, but there were aspects that just like didn't feel safe to me. And I can remember that general feeling of lack of safety in community, especially like in relationship to other people, especially as kind of like a general theme for a lot of my life. And I developed a lot of different coping mechanisms to be able to be with that general sense of dis-ease in connection to other people. And of course, there were people that I felt like more at ease with and people that I felt less at ease with. But generally speaking, I felt pretty uneaseful. It felt hard. And as I got into teenage years, specifically age 14, I had a really traumatic brain injury. I had like a very traumatic concussion. And the ways that I had learned how to cope with kind of my lack of ease, lack of sense of safety, really came to a head around that. Like I couldn't, the same techniques didn't work. Like I was too raw. And this is, I'm a freshman in high school, and like shortly thereafter, I started exploring alcohol and cannabis and other substances that I found could alleviate some of my internal, like, well, so that lack of safety and lack of ease for me, like, translated into self-hatred. That was, this world feels so fucked up. There must be something wrong with me. Then I hate myself. That was how I felt because as a teenager, especially, that carried up. And so I started drinking a lot, and I would black out a lot, and I'd wake up in weird spots, and sometimes with injuries. And I could share specific stories, but I'll not. And at some point, like I wasn't a daily drinker or anything like that, but like I would every once in a while I would just go get like really wasted, like probably every other week or so, sometimes more often, sometimes less, but I'd say that's like the average. And it was really, really unsafe. It was like I was taking that lack of safety to like extremes. Like,
Disassociating.
yeah, exactly. And I can remember really vividly a moment I had moved home from San Diego, home to Pacifica, to my parents' house after a year of being in San Diego, and like I felt like a failure,
Mm.
just massive failure. And I can remember sitting up on top of this cliffside smoking a Black and Mild. I used to smoke a lot of Black and Milds in those days. And looking down at these rocks that were probably about 75 feet down, and like having this thought, like it might be easier to just like jump onto these rocks. And that moment was like a really big game changer for me. It was like, nope. I have this imprint of love. I know what it feels like. I know I can access it. Like if I'm thinking about ending this, like, and it's like a real thought, no plan, just the thought. I'm like, I need help. Um, I'm really fortunate. Like my mom's a therapist. Like I have a deep well of resource at familially at my backing that I can reach into. And at that point, like I got brave enough to ask for help. And I didn't have any interest in going into traditional talk therapy. Just wasn't. I don't want to go sit on the other side of the table from my mom or someone like her. It was just like, nah. But I was open to something, and so there was a woman named Janice Erickson, who was a NLP practitioner and a theta healing practitioner who I went to go see. And I worked with her for, I want to say about a year, in once a month in individual counseling. And I really got aware of the thought patterns that I was running and the way that they were impacting me. And she introduced me to some basic mindfulness techniques, some meditation, not so much breath work, but visualization, like, basic breath work, I guess, just like taking how to take a deep breath. Also looking at the impact of food, which was something that I was interested at the time. I was also a competitive athlete at this stage in my life. And I got really interested, and then and started feeling better in myself. Wasn't like quote unquote healed, but like I also like didn't want to end my life. And that then led me into like a study of what she used, which was theta healing, really more at the level of like using it for myself. Like I wasn't necessarily like thinking I was going to use it as a practitioner, but I was trained to use it as a practitioner over the course of 2 years. And it's definitely like a very it's tapping into some esoteria. It's like working with the mind in kind of a hermetic sense, like if people are familiar with hermeticism, if you're not, Google it. And well, I guess you could also just like reference Joe Dispenza and like the work that he does and the work that so many other people are doing in so many different contexts and traditions. But the power of mentalism and changing one's mind. And so I got into these communities of spiritual seekers who are working with energy like theta healing and like using it to attract abundance and find purpose and heal, etc. And I've always been a pretty like physical guy. I don't know that I would say I was embodied necessarily, but I was physical. I really liked being in my body and using it. And there was a piece of that was absent in that community to me. And wasn't like no one was physical, but it was like there was like a de-emphasis of physicality with this, like in my eyes, an overemphasis on mentalism that didn't sit with me. Like it didn't. And so fast forward a few years and several injuries later, get really interested in rehabilitative movement and personal training with kind of like a lean towards working with people that were like on the edge of physical therapy, could kind of come out of that. And that just led me down this rabbit hole of like physical human potential, which kind of led me away from that spiritual community, in a sense. And then I found that this new community that I had around me was lacking in the spirit. And when I say that, like, I want to be careful because like I don't want to talk shit, but there was not an emphasis on a collective, connective, spiritual honoring within that physical community that I was a part of. And yeah, I'm getting super wordy, and so I think I'm just going to take a pause for a sec. And
yeah,
if
I can just reflect and just sort of sum up what you're saying. I mean, it sounds like it's you're experiencing these two different communities through your walk through life that maybe lacked a level of balance that you were seeking. Right. balance is such a hard and I think it's a razor's edge, and it's so easy to fall out of balance. And I think it's the it's an illusion too, right? We're constantly rebalancing more than we're balancing. Um, I've learned this through various practices that I've done. Whether it's a physical
parenting one
one,
of them?
parenting, handstands, like my acupuncture practice, whatever it may be. Like I can constantly am reminded of this like universal law, it seems. And so I mean, from what I'm hearing from you is you're experiencing that in these various communities that you are becoming a part of and these practices that you are doing. And you're like, no, this isn't like the full essence of the experience that I want to have. And no, this isn't quite it either. And so you're searching, you're seeking something that more fits what you feel like is a balanced, well-rounded life.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It brought something up for me. So I mentioned self-hatred earlier, right? And so when I went into each of these spaces, like more of a spiritual space and the more of the physical space, it felt like I was rekindling a relationship of compassion and love bordering on reverence for aspects of myself. But I was still like, so as someone who has felt self-hatred for prolonged periods of time, I've gotten really good at like segmenting myself and choosing which side of myself I can present to be acceptable and accepted. And so in the spiritual community, I could bring my spirit self out and like that part could be accepted. And so I could like learn how to love a little bit of it. And then like in the gym setting, I could like bring that physical side out and like learn to let it be loved a little bit. And like, it's okay to be seen. But that balance that you're speaking to, it's like in each of those situations, it was like there was a part of me that got elevated and another part of me that got compartmentalized and suppressed and oppressed, like internally, right? This isn't happening from somebody else, it's happening from me. And it's reinforced by the cultural narrative that I'm taking part in each of the situations, right? Like it's normal to elevate the body in gym culture and to de-emphasize like the spirit, like whatever we like in my definition of the way that I'm interacting with that word. And yeah, like imbalanced, right? And it's like there's this video that I put out on YouTube years ago. I'm not going to link it. Still there somewhere. You can find it if you can find it. If not, like let it be. That Isla will reference every once in a while. Cause I'm like, in this video, I'm like, I am happy. And like the vibe, not a happy vibe, like cognitive dissonance. And so I think that's something that really like that cognitive dissonance is something that definitely led me. I didn't know it was leading me, but it led me towards truths, towards like my truths. Who am I? And like I have about a 3 to 7 year cycle in any given like space where it's like that's how long it's going to take me to realize what I need next. Just noticing that over time.
Yeah, that's cool. You've been tracking that a little bit.
Retrospectively, yeah.
Yeah, still tracking.
Yeah.
So what was the last cycle that you departed from and it led into your next cycle?
Yeah. It got dramatic. Okay, so the last cycle that I departed from, I'm gonna get less like abstract and more specific at this point. So
please, that's the goods.
I'm gonna go timeline. 2015, I get married. 2016, my daughter is born. 2017, I branch out on my own, start my own business. 2018, I buy a house, condo. 2019, I revamp my business, get its own dedicated space, and initiate a divorce. mutual initiation of divorce. 2020 COVID hits and my brand new gym goes under. December of 2019, I meet Isla on the dance floor in Santa Cruz, which is a whole different story. We begin a relationship together. When COVID hits, she moves in with me in a tiny house that's a 8 by 16 foot box. My daughter spends half her time with us, and our 75-pound dog spends all of his time with us. Cramped living space. In this time frame, I think of it as a death experience. It was like what I had been doing for my passion project as well as my livelihood, like I could no longer do the way that I had been doing it. I think maybe if I'd geographically been somewhere else, like I might have been able to, but here in the Bay Area, it was just not going to happen. And I took that really hard. In addition to like leaving the house that I had purchased, leaving the marriage that I had spent 7 years cultivating, and like starting like a new chapter. And it really felt like I died, like energetically, like a part of me like ceased to exist. And well, that's too strong a term. It got composted. And that composting cycle felt like a lot of
An
pressure.
identity died.
Yeah.
An identity of yours died for sure.
Yeah, it did. And in that identity death, I got to harness like a really cool opportunity retrospectively. Like so much has changed since then in so many profound and beautiful ways. I'm really grateful for it. If I were going to speak to it kind of like directly but indirectly, I got confronted by patterns that I had hidden myself from and like bypassed, like steps that I had skipped. And coming back to that self-hatred and like compartmentalization, I hit a stage in my life where like the pieces of myself that I had like pushed down weren't going to stay down anymore, and they came up. And that looked like repeating old cycles of addiction, self-hatred reemerging, dealing with like really intense relational conflict, both with my current partner and my daughter's mother, and my daughter and my parents and my brother and my friends. It was like all these people around me, just like it was really challenging. And in that, like I got to get a really clear look at myself. And there were aspects of that self that I really didn't like. I didn't like the reflection that I got, and giving credit to myself, like I've taken the opportunity to like learn from that. And I have like wonderful people around me, yourself included. Isla is like a huge person for me in terms of support and reflection to come into integrity with myself and to really get like comfortable with the uncomfortable parts of myself. Right. It's like I started off this conversation like naming the Ramitush Ohlone people. Like I didn't even know that name till I was in my 30s. I knew the name Ohlone, but not Ramitush. Like, and like this whole thing of like genocide, like being connected to it. Like I didn't think about that. Those are all pieces of myself that I downplayed and oppressed. And that's just like one example as part of this conversation. But so yeah, that transformation has really like supported me in coming into myself in a more full, like, to use the catchphrase, holistic way.
That word is very ick, but I do understand what you're saying.
Yeah, I know. It's
no, but you're right. You're right.
Yeah.
Honoring all parts of yourself, or as many as you can access.
Yeah. And also acknowledging when I'm having a hard time honoring them. That's been one of like the big ones for me, is like there's things that I'm connected to that I don't like, that I have a hard time honoring. And like therein lies my work. Right? Because that's part of me. Can I uphold the dignity of that part, and with accountability and like calls to action when shit's going haywire.
Thank you for sharing that, by the way. Good story. What does your personal practice look like these days?
Personal practice. Yeah.
This can be personal as in professional. It can also be personal as in like what you do to take care of yourself.
Oh, cool. I was going more
Or
towards the
or
latter,
all.
but yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I will share like I'm kind of a self-centered individual a lot of the time, so I'll go ahead and just share from that place.
Yeah.
Um, the I think not I think the foundation of my like feeling healthy and whole is being out in settings that have very little man-made material, out in trees, out near water. As I'm saying that, I guess it doesn't necessarily matter so much if there's like old ruined buildings. That doesn't bother me. So long as there's also a lot of animals and plants. It's foundational to my like my my whole self's well-being is to be immersed in places where I'm hearing birds, where I'm hearing other animals and seeing them, feeling and hearing wind, feeling and hearing trees, feeling and hearing water. Hopefully it doesn't smell too stinky.
Hmm.
Um, and so it is a practice for me to get out in those spaces. It's also a practice that I have to spend time moving, breathing, and being still every morning, and to pray every morning to a prayer that is uniquely my own as much as it is connected to lineages that I am connected to. And then there's also the connection to my partner and to the people in my life, which feels like a deep part of my whole well-being is having real intimate time, be it conversation or touch or play or just space sharing with people that I love and that I know also love me and have mutual respect and dignity with one another. That's a part of my practice for myself. I also love to lift weights and move my body in a variety of different ways, inclusive of practicing killing people and being killed by people through jujitsu as a game. As a game, it's fun for me. So that's all woven into my personal practice. I'll stop talking for a sec.
Great. So I think my last question for today is centered around the project that we are founding and working on, Elemental Movement, and what what has drawn you into this project and what keeps you investing your time and energy into building this thing that we are building.
Mm, yeah. I mean, what keeps me drawn is definitely inspiration, just plain and simple inspiration. I feel very inspired by what we're about. And there's a story of that inspiration, which is reflected through my own story that I've shared a little bit about. And then also the stories that I've heard shared by yourself and Isla and Alika and so many other people that we're all connected to of like the power of connection. I've been in healing spaces like very regularly in different contexts, whether it's like rehabilitative movement or like spiritual places or therapeutic like talk places, all these different spaces and places very regularly for the last 16 years, both as a participant and as a practitioner. And it's become really clear to me in that time that like we don't heal by ourselves, not fully. It's like there's a part that needs to be done for the self and by the self, but there's also like a lot of it. Like I'm just thinking about myself. I'll just share this. Like I did all of this healing work individually by myself. I felt good in myself and by myself. And that's still my happy place. Like my most relaxed place is by myself out on the beach where all I'm interacting with is seals and porpoises in the water and birds in the air. And that's it. I'm happy. It's easy. I'm relaxed. you bring me back into community, like with a bunch of people, I get tight, I get tension, stories run. And like that's after 16 years of work. And so in this time, like I've had so much that I still see so much emphasis put on individual work. Go do your work. Oh, this is happening. Go do your work. I'm not taking that away. Like, yeah, go do your work, but like we got to do it together, because we are like, I know I could like reference like facts about this, but like my experience is that I am a communal being that has forgotten how to be a communal being. So what we're doing, to me, is providing a space to practice that, where it's safe enough to make mistakes and learn with each other as we do that. And in our microcosm of like yourself, myself, Alika, and Isla, like we've been doing that together.
Yeah.
For like, you know, you, Alika, myself, and Sean, just to bring Sean's name in here, props to Sean. Like we were doing that a year ago, right? And then like he's decided not to continue with us, and like we're continuing, and it's like relational conflict is going to happen internally and
happen.
externally. Right. And so for me, like what we're doing and what's exciting about it for me is that we're moving into something where we're intentionally creating space to work with that, and bringing together these like diverse people, diverse experiences, and diverse like practices, in terms of like lineage, background, current life experience, past life experience. Like it's like we all bring something very different to the table, and to the circles, and like so do the people that we're calling in.
Yeah.
And the thing, I was talking with our mutual friend Nosh yesterday about elemental movement, and there's this thing that I said to him that feels like it's really like alive for me right now, is this, that like part of this is like creating a community that doesn't have like a centralized leadership. It's decentralized. Like we're all in community. There's not like one person or even four people who lead the community. Like, yeah, there's people that are like holding space and like creating events and whatnot and offering practices, but like the people that show up are just as much the leaders, if they want to be, as anybody else. Yeah. And so I'm very inspired by this idea of doing things together. Yeah, and I'm also I'm very much looking forward to like seeing where it goes and noticing the patterns as they emerge, and learning how to listen to them and practicing that with other people. Yeah, it's something that feels like it lights me up. So I keep going.
Well, all right. Yeah, a lot of those words you said gave me chills, my friend.
Yeah, thank you. That felt really nice.
It's good to drop in today. Always a pleasure to talk to you, my friend.
Yeah, I actually do want to plug two things real quick before we close out. One is our community, Elemental Movement. If you're listening to this and you're interested, you can find us at elementalmovement.life. And I'm also happy to extend an invitation to have a one-to-one conversation with you between me and yourself, or I'm going to volunteer the other 3 founding members of Matt, Alika, and Isla, if you would prefer to talk to one of them, but we'd love to talk to you. And then the last is just for myself personally. I offer one-to-one and couples work, working with nervous system regulation, relational health, and connectivity, with the prerequisite of being willing to honor and respect the dignity of ourselves and those we're relating with, both via Zoom and in person here in Portola Valley, California, in this healing space that I'm actually sitting in right now as we're talking. So I'm just going to drop that here if you're interested.
Thank you for the plugs. That is good. Well, it's been a pleasure to speak with you, my friend. And we'll talk soon. And we hope to hear from you soon, whoever may be listening.
When you're ready to begin your journey, visit elementalmovement.life